Recognizing one's self-progression, it's something, doesn't matter what it is, but just identifying when you're actually progressing is a very, very powerful thing, not only mentally, but physically, for your soul, for everything. We all as humans, we naturally want to be better, be getting better at something. We don't have to be great at it right now, but we definitely want to know that we are getting better. We are making strides in the right direction. And photography is no different. I know that every August, me personally, I get into a creative rut. I actually, even as of right now, I haven't gone out and shot anything in about 2 weeks. Happens to me every summer. I can't stand the heat. The sun rises too early, it sets too late. Days are so long, everything's green. It just becomes, the summer becomes a marathon. It becomes very difficult, and it's a common trait with outdoor photographers and hobbyists. It's not anything with just me. I've talked to many people that struggle with the same thing, but it really puts me in a photographic rut every August, and I start to kind of get down on myself and question, my own worth with photography, my self-worth. Am I any good? Am I getting better? Am I going to make it? Do I need to just do something different? It gets hard sometimes, but like I mentioned, identifying, progression is wildly important. And what's interesting about photography in the digital age is that it feels very temporary. And what I mean by that is, you go on location, you take a photo, you go home, you edit the photo, you put it on social media, you get the likes, you get the engagement, and then it just slowly slips away into the digital archives, slides down to your bottom of your Instagram grid. And you don't really go back. You don't really look at anything. All you're really looking at is your last, couple months worth of photographs. And when you do that, it makes it very difficult to identify your progression. So you almost have to go out of your way to scroll to the bottom of that Instagram feed from when it first started, or go into your computer and pull out those old files, those old archives, and look at where you came from. I talk to a lot of photographers that are just getting into it, and they all preface the conversation the same way, that they're hobbyists, they're enthusiasts, but they're not very good. They're not very good at it. They wish they were better, and we all wish we were better. But I bet, and I always recommend the same thing, look at where you started and look at where you're at now, and I guarantee you're better than you think you are, and you have progressed much farther, much more rapidly than you ever would have anticipated. So this is something that I did last August, and I'm going to do it again this year, and just kind of go through some of my old photos and kind of compare it to where I'm at right now to hopefully get me out of my creative rut, my photographic rut. And I came up with 5 ways to really determine, are you improving as a photographer, as an outdoor photographer? And if so, how much are you improving? And it's pretty interesting to see, where you started and where you're at right now. And the first way is with composition. The way you composed images when you first started versus now. And it doesn't have to be, when you first started. It could be a couple years ago. I'm actually going to show you an image, which is the very first image I ever posted on social media when I started to get into photography. And I love the photo. At the time, it was fantastic. I was really excited about it. And I originally wasn't going to post it. I was nervous, but I ultimately did. And I'll show you right now. But this is it. This is a lake by my house. Got up early to shoot this image, and it's, compositionally, it's an absolute mess. You have this road coming out of the side. You have the blown out rising sun here, and the eye always automatically goes to the brightest part of the scene. So for this image, the eye is going to automatically go here. You have a leading line that's taking you over here, which is the most bland area of this image. It's almost monochromatic, black and white. So there's a lot of visual tension between the rising sun and the leading line here. The eye doesn't really know what to do, and then it doesn't know where to go after that. So compositionally, this image doesn't work at all. And then this is an image that I captured last fall in Acadia, and I love this compositionally. Great foreground interest, great leading lines that leading you into a solid midground area here. It's also leading you to background interest, which is also has the setting sun in the background, and everything leads directly into the brightest part of the image, which is where the eye is naturally going to go anyway. So for me, this is a very easy and pleasing image to look at from a compositional perspective. So I really like this. This is one of my favorite images compositionally. And then here's another one of my early images. This is just it's a snapshot. I took an image of this birdhouse. I loved the sky, and at the time I thought the image was fantastic, but there's no composition here at all. And then this is a photo that I took in April of this year in Hawaii. Love the naturally occurring repeating patterns here, leading lines drawing you into the midground that kind of leads you up into this sideways triangle right here. And it all kind of points right in this area here, which is the brightest area of the image, which is the rising sun. I love it when the composition all kind of leads the eye naturally to the brightest part of the image, because that's naturally where the eye wants to go anyway. So this is for me personally, this is another one of my favorite composed images. And then here's another one of my very early images as well. Your typical under the pier, under the bridge shot. We've all been there. We've all done it. I still like these kind of images, but as you can see, there's just not a lot of not a lot going on with this image here. And then here's another one. The rules of third are at play all over this. You know, you have the log originating down here in the bottom third, leads your eye up to the top of the waterfall, which is the brightest part of the scene, which is where the sun is setting. It crisscrosses this log here in the top right third, and then you have the waterfall breaking off and coming down here in, near the top left third of the image. So rules of thirds all over this image. And honestly, I don't think it matters, what compositional technique you're using now. Repeating patterns, rule of thirds, creating depth with foreground, midground, background. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter as long as you're doing something, as long as there's a method to the madness. You're not just taking a picture of a birdhouse like I did, or a random street coming out of the side of your photo. So if you can say compositionally that you're better now than you were then, that's a huge step in the right direction. Now the second, and this is very important, is you have to ask yourself, are you regularly using your histogram? I resisted the histogram for the better part of the first year. I didn't even know what it was. It was just a funky little chart on my LCD screen, and it just took up real estate on my screen, and I just always removed it. I would just take my photos, look at the screen. If it looked properly exposed, that was it. Take it home. And what I found was 9 times out of 10, every one of my images was underexposed. So I had to increase the exposure, 1 or 2 stops. And whenever you do that, you're just introducing noise into the shadows of your images. You're creating noise in the darker areas of your images. And you're just not getting a nice, crisp, clean image like you would if you were just using your histogram. I got a couple cool snapshots here. Whoops, let me go back to this. So this image right here is an image. Well, first of all, if you're not familiar with the how a histogram works, this area on the left side is your darker tones, the middle is your midtones, and the right side of the histogram is your lighter tones. Excuse me. And this image here, so when you have all your tonal values piled up on the right side of the screen, that means that your image is going to be overexposed. If you have all your tonal values really piling up on the left side of the histogram, that's going to mean your image is going to be underexposed. You want your histogram to look like this, where all your tonal values are piled up right in the middle. You don't have anything pushed up on the right side. You don't have anything pushed up on the left side. Everything is in a nice middle arc like this. And the image that created this histogram is this. It's not a super exciting image, but it's a very well exposed image. And what's cool is if you go to develop, watch the histogram here. I'm going to move the exposure tab around and just watch what happens here. If I decrease the exposure, you can see the histogram moves to the left. If you increase the exposure, it moves to the right. And if you bounce it back and forth, you can see what it does. So once I started to kind of really understand exactly how a histogram works, and I started to use it on a much more regular basis, I found that I was only having to tweak my exposure just very, very minute amounts in post, which ultimately led to much cleaner, crisper images. And that was definitely a very pleasing sign of progression for me personally. So whether or not you're using your histogram more often is a good sign that things are moving in the right direction for you. Now the next portion of it is, I should say the next question is, are you shooting or are you shooting with different lenses now? Now, I'm not saying you got to go out and buy the most expensive glass there is. It doesn't really matter how good the glass is. What really matters is, do you have options from a lens perspective? So when I got into photography, I shot with my kit lens for the better part of the first year. And every time I went into the scene, I knew exactly what I had to work with. I knew my only lens, and this is how I was going to capture the scene. But if you have lens options, when you go and get in front of your scene, you got to decide, do you want to go wide? Do you want to capture the whole thing? Do you want to, zoom in with your 70 to 200 and pick off distant details? Is there something in the foreground that you want to compress against the background and pull out your 70 to 200 for that too? Or do you need your mid-range zoom? And just having to make that decision will make you a better photographer. Having the ability or having the need to pick what lens matches the vision that you have in your head for that particular scene will make you a better photographer. So whether or not you're using multiple lenses, you don't have to have 10 lenses. Heck, I think I only have 4 lenses. But as long as you have just more than one, as long as you have to make a decision on what lens to use, that's a great sign of progression as well. Now, the fourth item is light. Are you shooting your images in better light now? And if you are, why are you doing it? Or understanding exactly why you're doing it. That's very powerful, because whenever you start off in photography, everybody knows you want to shoot in the, shoot sunrise, shoot sunset. That's the best time to shoot. Don't shoot during the daytime, because you get the harsh light that casts straight down and creates ugly shadows on everything. But there's a little bit more to it than getting, color in the sky in sunrise or sunset. But, at those times, the sun is very, very low on the horizon. It creates nice, soft ambient light. But this, as the sun is rising and is low on the horizon, the sun is actually casting light sideways. So it really helps with creating a three-dimensional effect, because, our eyes see 3D, but our cameras capture 2D. So if it's, you're shooting trees or leaves or flowers or people or whatever it is, if the light is coming in sideways, it's going to create texture. It's going to create depth. It's going to create dimension on your images. And that's very powerful. Like this image right here, this is, this is in, you can see my watermark, 2015, completely flat image. I was close to sunset, but there's just nothing going on here, no light. Now this image, the light is everything with this image. The sun was setting, it was coming in from the side right here, and it casts this beautiful, soft, warm light against this tree. You can see all the contours of the tree, all the textures, and the light of this image makes it. It's not about the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. It's these amazing trees framing it. So without this light, it just wouldn't work. Here's another image, once again, midday, overcast, no harsh light, soft light, but there's just no interesting light anywhere. It's just completely void of light. And in this image here, this is from on the Nepali coast in Kauai. There's nice evening. The sun is very low on the horizon. It's coming in sideways through here, and it's just scraping across these razor sharp edges of the Nepali mountain coast or Nepali mountains. And if you zoom in, you can really see all the contours and the texture of the light on these ridges. And it's amazing. And it's all because of light coming in sideways. I mean, that's everything. So if you're shooting in better lighting conditions and really understanding exactly why you're doing it, that's a great sign that you're progressing as well. And then the final, the fifth, way to really tell if you're progressing as a photographer is very important. And the question you need to ask yourself is, are you a better post-processor now? Probably the telltale sign of a new photographer is the way they post-process their images. And I am definitely not absent of this. It took me forever to get out of this, but newer photographers, they get crazy with the saturation. They go bananas with the clarity slider. Everything is over sharpened. You kind of do the same treatment on all images. You don't even really look at the image. You just crush the highlights, you jack up the shadows, and it kind of creates this HDR effect, and all your images kind of look the same. And here's an example of this. This is one of my early images. This is my wife doing yoga on a paddleboard. I went crazy with the orange slider with the saturation. I mean, the sky is way too orange. The reflection in the water is way too orange. Hell, even Darcy's wearing an orange shirt. It's just way too warm of an image. The white balance is completely off. It's a mess. And then here's another image from a recent trip in Hawaii also, just a few months ago. This is a very authentic image. It's very true to the way that I saw this scene with my own eyes. You know, very natural colors. It's very subtle. It's, you know, I actually pulled a lot of saturation out of a lot of these colors. It's just a very calm, soothing color palette and, you know, post-processing treatment. Here's another image, way too much saturation, way too much vignetting. It just looks cheesy, honestly. And in this one here, it's, you know, one of my other very early images, way too much sharpening, way too much shadow recovery. It looks like it's all HDR in a very crunchy, clarity-ridden image. And in this image, I love this image. I was really kind of working with specific color palettes. I wanted to use an analogous color palette, easy for me to say, using you know, purples and blue hues to make a very cool and subtle and calming photo. And I think it really worked with this one. I typically don't edit my images like this, but it just goes to show, you know, that you're just kind of I'm trying to take my editing, you know, repertoire to a different level and trying to get a little bit better at it. So I guess that's a, you know, a good sign, of course. So if you can say yes, that you're getting better at post-processing, once again, that's a fantastic step in the right direction. And honestly, if you can say yes to one or two of these, you know, 5 ways to determine it, you're definitely moving in the right direction. And, you know, this exercise, like I said at the beginning of the video, it's wildly important to identify to yourself that you are improving as a photographer, because if you don't take the time and look at your early work and compare it to what you're doing now, you can really lose sight of that and not give yourself the old, you know, pat on the back. We all need pats on the back, and you know, who better to give that to you than yourself? So you got to do that kind of stuff. But you know, I hope the video was informative and helpful for some. And I don't do this often, but you know, if you're not subscribed to my channel and you like the content I'm creating here, if you could subscribe, it definitely would mean a lot. You know, hit the bell icon so you're notified whenever I upload. I'm usually on a weekly cadence. I'm on a pretty good streak right now, but for the most part, it's weekly uploads. And if you enjoyed the video, if you could give it a thumbs up. As always, any questions you have, just leave them in the comments. I guarantee I'll get back to you. And I appreciate you watching, and I will see you all next week. Bye.